The Bills Committee on Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2012 has already reached the appointed time. We have already formed a quorum. I declare the meeting to order. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's meeting. And this Bills Committee meeting is the first Bills Committee meeting in the new session, and that also signifies that the work of this Council has formally started. And I suggest that if there is any interest to declare, please do so before the start of the meeting, and then we'll invite officials to join us. First of all, I'd like to declare that I own properties, and my profession, well, I'm an accountant by profession. I've also provided consultancy service on properties, and we've also provided advice to our clients on this bill. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Madam Chair, I'd like to declare interest as well. I also own properties, and my company would also provide advice to our clients on tax matters, including property tax and stamp duty. Mr. Andrew Leung, I also own properties, and I have different companies, and they also own properties. Yes, Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Madam Chair, myself, my company, and my family members own properties in Hong Kong. Mr. Alan Leung, I'd also like to declare that I do own properties too. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. Madam Chair, both myself and my company also own properties. Ms. Emily Lau. Madam Chair, I own properties. I serve the community of Hong Kong. Mr. Abraham SHEK. Madam Chair, I own properties. I represent the functional constituency, and that's the construction and real estate sector. I also own properties both under my name and my company's name, and I also serve my constituency, but then at the same time I'm also serving the community of Hong Kong. Mr. Tony Chet, Chairman, I own properties, and my company also provide consultancy service to clients, and my companies are also involved in property transaction. Yes, another member also declare interest. Yes, I own properties. Mr. Chen Kem Lam. Madam Chair, I also own properties. Mr. Yu Si Wing. I declare that I do own properties myself. Mr. Tan Ka Bill, I own properties. Madam Chair. Anyone else? Mr. Paul Chair. Sorry, speakers not coming through. Mr. Ronnie Tong. I own properties. I've also been involved in litigation involving real estate. Yes, we have also talked to the Secretariat about declaration arrangements, and the Secretariat also suggested that on every occasion before we speak, we should declare interest. Yes, Mr. Paul Chair. Well, I was half joking. Well, it wasn't serious enough. I'd like to formally declare that I do own properties, and also I'm also holding properties under the name of my company. Thank you. All right, let's invite the administration team to join us. I'll ask them if they need to declare. Is there any requirement under the rules of procedure? I'll ask the Secretary to look into it. All right, please note that the Secretary for Transport and Housing has talked to me and the Secretary that he'd like to attend today's meeting, but then because of a clash with meeting schedule, he can only come at around 11:45.
咁當局咧已經就法案委員會咧。
The administration has already come up with a response to the issues raised at the meetings of the Bills Committee held on the 8th of July. Concerning charitable organizations paying stamp duty, they've already made a response. So I'll ask them to respond to that. And Mr. Abraham SHEK also issued 2 letters to the Bills Committee. I think up to today, there are already 3. And the letters have been passed on to the administration, and on the first 2 letters, the administration has already come up with written responses. So I'll also ask the administration to walk us through their response on paper number CB bracket 11618 bracket 03, and also their response to Mr. Abraham SHEK's letter. Yes? Sorry, speaker is not coming through. Very often in the course of exchanging correspondence, as I've already written 3 times to the administration during the last month or so, I think without taking up too much of members' time, because some members might think that we are actually filibustering. Well, I'm just talking about the way we view this issue. Number one, this bill has been dragging on for 7 months, Madam Chair, and it's not that members would like to delay it. Well, it's just that we're trying to discharge our responsibilities, because if you look at the 3 letters that I've written during the past 2 months or so, and every time when the administration responded to my letter, I would respond to them again. And if you look at the last letter that I wrote on the 12th of September, is very simple. All right, as there's no time for the letter to be translated into Chinese, well, in the letter dated September the 12th, I talk about the response by the administration, and if the administration is not going to respond to that this time, then I think we should not spend time on that, and also the series of mails between myself and the administration, because during the past 7 months, I've asked a number of questions and they have not been addressed. And actually, according to the Law Society, they also wrote to the administration in May, and they're also saying that the administration has not been able to respond to their questions. All right, if the administration has not responded to my letter dated September the 12th, we can always ask the administration to come up with a written response to my letter dated September the 12th, because I also raised a number of legal issues, and also they refer to a number of court cases. I've also responded to them, and therefore, without the Chinese translation, the public will not be able to read that and understand that, and I don't think we should take up too much of this Bills Committee's time. I understand that members' time is very precious. Yes, Mr. Abraham SHEK, I understand that the administration has already responded to the issues raised by members at the last meeting held on July the 8th, and also Mr. Abraham SHEK, your letter has been issued by you personally, but then their response might also have to do with some members' concerns, and therefore I'd like to ask the administration to briefly walk us through their reply, and then I'll see if members would like to follow up on these matters. But then, as Mr. SHEK just said, well, we have already spent a long time on this Bills Committee, and I think members' views are already very clear. So let's see what the administration's views are and their latest position. And if there are any points that have been repeated, then please do not repeat them, and please be brief and concise. Yes? Ms. Wong? Yes, first of all, the Secretary for Transport and Housing will be attending the meeting later today. He will be talking about the proposed waiver on companies solely owned by Hong Kong permanent residents, and also the waiver for charitable organizations. He'll be exchanging views with members on those 2 issues. But then, at the same time, we are actually having the 16th joint Guangdong-Hong Kong cooperation meeting, and the secretary has to be there, and therefore he'll be arriving at around 11:45, so that he'll be able to respond to the 2 main issues, and he would like to exchange views with members on those 2 issues. With regard to the last meeting held on the 8th of July, well, since the last meeting, with regard to the list of issues passed on to us by the Secretariat, we have already issued some papers in response to those. First of all, on the first paper, that's about charitable organizations. Once again, we would like to state our concerns on charitable organizations on the exemption issue. That might also duplicate what the Secretary will be saying in a moment, and maybe we might think it appropriate to leave it to the Secretary, who will be responding to that. And as regards Mr. SHEK's letters, we have responded to 2 already, and earlier on Mr. SHEK also asked us to come up with more concrete examples to illustrate that if exemptions are granted to Hong Kong PR-owned companies, will there be loopholes, and also what would be infeasible, and so on. We have given some examples, and in the following 2 letters, as Mr. SHEK had different views on the examples that we cited, that's why we try to explain those further. And the third one, was on last Thursday. We once again received Mr. Shek's letter, and Mr. Shek once again made some suggestions and comments on our responses earlier, as we just received that letter, and he also raised a number of legal points. That's why we haven't had a chance to respond to those yet. But then in simple terms, we are of the view that given those examples, whether or not it's at the meeting of the Bills Committee or in the written papers, we have already set out that, for companies, allotting shares and so on. There are many ways to go about it, and sometimes it's difficult to find out, and that's why we do have reservation about Mr. Shek's proposal. And also earlier on, at Bills Committee meetings, we also explained to members that concerning members and some deputations, suggestions, including the HKAB and also the Law Society. We are going to move some amendments, and earlier on, we already talked about redevelopment. We already talked about non-Hong Kong permanent residents who might have to sell their properties not out of their own volition. They have to sell their properties because of some reasons, and under those circumstances, they should also be exempted. And there are also some technical amendments. We have already submitted a paper setting out these technical amendments, and also on redevelopment, that is the CSA, the draft CSAs have also been set out. So we do think that there should be some mechanism, and we have now come up with a draft CSA. We would also like to listen to members' comments on these drafts. So that's the overview of our latest position.
Mr. Abraham SHEK, I propose that each member will have 5 minutes. Mr. Jeffrey Lam, just now the secretary said that the deputy secretary said that she's received different views. Maybe she could use this chance to go over the different views with us. Maybe we'll wait for the secretary to give us an account or for clarification. She can't simply say that they are simply different views. We're legislators, so we would like to know more about these views because it will help us when we deal with the bill. And this will be a question. Says administration. Let me clarify that just now I meant in relation to actual cases, if we exempt Hong Kong PR-owned companies, there may be loopholes and there will be difficulty in the implementation. We've given some examples. And Mr. Shek holds different views to our examples. I was referring to that. In relation to the two documents, we try to elaborate and explain again. Say, for example, in relation to power of attorney and the power of attorney, the declaration, etc. People may circumvent the system. And in relation to those expressed by deputations, say, for example, the Law Society about substitute property, about replacement properties, and the evidence used in court, we have already explained that we have already explained that. Well, I just wanted some clarification from the Deputy Secretary. That wasn't a question. Mr. Shek. Well, let me explain that that is not my document. My document is rather complicated. You have to spend some time reading it, and in order to be fair to the administration, you need to give them time to give us a response. Because every time we only supply the information paper a day before from them. I hope that they will not just they will not be wishy-washy will instead give us a proper reply. Spend some time to work on your reply. It's been 7 months and I've asked a lot of questions. I fully understand the difficulties faced by the administration, and I try to understand them as much as possible so that I will be able to help them in relation to the letter dated the 28th of May from the Law Society, that is 1165/12 to 13/01.
Comments in the response to the following issues raised in our first submission as they remain vague and unclear.
In 2.3, there are A, B, and C. I would like to talk about D.
Corporate entity whose shareholders are Hong Kong permanent resident, we note that the administration considered this proposal may have loopholes and enable Hong Kong permanent resident shareholders to circumvent BSD by transferring property entitlement to non-HKPR shareholders by way of nomination, declaration of trust, or allocation of new shares. In fact, these loopholes can be addressed by imposing restriction on alienation of shares for a fixed period, and if alienated within the relevant period, then BSD previously exempted will be recouped. So if you
look at the letters, it is not just a humble request from a legislator. It is an issue identified by the Law Society as well, and they've stated so in their submission. Hong Kong newspapers, well, even before I put forward the proposal of amendment, the administration and the newspapers of Hong Kong have treated me as if I was an enemy. But I'm a legislator. I have the right to make to propose an amendment. Some newspapers said that I'm only speaking for the interests of the sector. No, that is not the case. I'm speaking for Hong Kong people. I quote this paper. I identify that there are some issues in paragraph 2.3. It's not the case that I'm not concerned with the interests of my sector, but the interest of Hong Kong as a whole is greater. I want to tell you that it's not just Abraham SHEK who would put forward such views. There are other bodies who have already done so. And I've been asking the administration for their views about the loopholes, and I will propose an amendment. Well, I don't want to waste your time because I want to set down the framework so that I can have a proper discussion with the administration. So I have already taken into account the views of the administration. I have also taken into account your views. This is an entrapment. Don't think that you can play hardball and then you can direct Hong Kong people as to what to do. Hong Kong basic law under Article 25 states that everyone is equal. How come there are two groups of Hong Kong PRs? Well, if you buy a flat in your own capacity, then you don't have to pay 15%. But if you buy the property in the name of a company, you have to pay the 15%. For me, it has violated Article 25 of the Basic Law. Well, you've spent almost 5 minutes. What is your question? No, it doesn't matter. I just want to state my view. I have already taken into consideration all the views of the administration. I've taken them all into consideration. And in my proposed amendment, well, the administration told me that there is no room for maneuver before they read my proposed amendment. But we have the power to propose amendments, and the administration should first listen to our proposed amendments before criticizing us. I've been a legislator for 13 years. I have seen a lot of amendments. And it's the first time today that I have the experience of being the opposition. It's very difficult for a member's proposal to be carried. So I have taken into account and taken on board all the views of the administration. Please speed up. Yes. You should not take away our rights. This is a special case, so it requires extraordinary measures. You should not take away or deprive us of our civil rights. And in the original text, well, when it comes to redevelopment purchases made by developers, well, please, maybe you wait till the second round. I really would like you to ask some questions. Well, the question is coming. It's over 6 minutes. Any reply in relation to Mr. Shek's comments? The administration's respects views of the administration. In relation to redevelopment, we have taken on board members' views, and we have also put forward the draft CSA. If Mr. Shek proposed his amendment, we will also look into it in detail. Mr. Anthony Cheung only attended one of the 13 meetings we've had, but he will be coming. I don't want to make it difficult for civil servants. Second member who is to ask question, Mr. James Toll. Well, actually, I can also wait for Mr. Cheung, the secretary, to come, but I will ask the question so that they'll have more time to ponder on it. In the past few days, the administration has been talking about loopholes. The secretary and the deputy secretary has been saying the same thing. I've been mulling over it. For an ordinary Hong Kong PR, he enjoys an exemption. But if there are loopholes, to me, the biggest loopholes is that an overseas resident finds a Hong Kong PR to engage in maybe a tacit or a secret power of attorney or trust. So if we're talking about millions of people, well, as long as you find one such person, then you will be exempted the BSD. But if you want to find a company, well, now, in response to the administration's views, we have proposed certain restrictions. You have to pay the stamp duty first, and then over a long time, you will have to prove that none of the shares have been transferred to a non-Hong Kong PR. So you can compare the two. You find a Hong Kong PR, do this for me, and buy the property, sell it, and you don't have to pay the BSD. But if you want to control a company, say with 3 or 4 shareholders, all of them are Hong Kong PRs with numerous directors. And for over a long time, you have to assume that there won't be any conflict, any problems among the shareholders. No money problems and no grudges, nothing. And we're talking about a very long time, many years. And on top of that, secretaries, the employees, everyone who's done or run errands for them will have to keep their mouth shut and not divulge the secret. So if you just juxtapose the two, then you're talking about the 1 to 100 million. That is the chance. It doesn't make sense. You can simply find one person out of millions of Hong Kong PR to circumvent the control. And the other option is much more difficult. But you now focus on the more difficult approach. And we get bogged down in a debate. Is it a meaningful discussion? You can compare the risks of the two. A Hong Kong PR as opposed to a company owned by a number of Hong Kong PR over a long period of time, which the risk of which is higher. Isn't it exaggerated? Is it out of proportion? I think we have to go back to square one. The policy intent. I've been talking about this for many times of the BSD, and it's because the property market was exuberant. As I've said many times, the more exemption, the less effective the BSD will be. We're talking about genuine housing need of Hong Kong PR. We need to take care of this need. That's why we propose certain exemptions. We admit that Hong Kong PRs have a genuine need to buy a flat for self-occupation. That's why we have this exemption, that is, a Hong Kong PR buying a flat for self-occupation. There will be exemption only in this regard. But if you expand the exemption and extend it to cover companies, then we're talking about a different realm. We've been saying this many times. There are many different operations, many different ways to transfer shares. So this is not just a question of whether it is proportional or not. It's back to the policy intent of the exemption. We should not try to find more and more exemptions, because this will undermine the effectiveness of this policy. We have to bear this in mind, and we don't want to send out a wrong message to the market that the administration is willing to relax a lot of things. And if we identify obvious loopholes, and for people who would like to magnify such loopholes, and by using it to circumvent the BSD, we don't want to allow that to happen. Just one word. So we're talking about exemptions for millions of people buying it in their own name. Then you have to to consider the total risk and the proportion of the risk. You can't say that by exempting companies, it will greatly increase your risk. If that is the case, I won't argue with you. But if you say that this will greatly increase the risk, I think that this is a wrong concept. Just now, Mr. Shek was talking about paying the duty first and refund later. So why do you think it is not feasible? You did not answer, but I will give you time later to answer this. Next, Mr. Kenneth Leung.
Madam Chair, well, we have spent a lot of time on this bill already. I've also heard different members' views. I also respect the wisdom of Mr. Abraham SHEK and also his seriousness about this bill and also his legal knowledge. All right, I think we have already discussed this issue long enough. It's about Hong Kong companies and whether they should be granted this exemption. I've thought about this long and hard, and I've also heard the views by many members. Well, the administration's concerns have also been taken note of. All right, with the establishment of a company, will there be a lot of trust and also a lot of agreements behind the scene? And as a result, there might be alienation of shares that we might not be aware of. I can only say that that can be done. Well, as to how that can be done, well, I'm not going to review that, but then with regard to exemption for companies, I've already said that I had reservation from day one. But then, as members have asked the administration for a lot of information and a lot of projections and so on, and they've also asked the administration to say that with the implementation of stamp duty, what the trends are going to be like. And of course, the administration is not in a position to provide us with such a macroscopic information or data. Indeed, no one else would be able to provide that to us. So I tried to look at Mr. Abraham SHEK's committee stage amendment, because I was also interested in what Mr. SHEK would like to move in the committee stage amendment. I'd like to know the details because for the policies, I think there is no way that we'll be able to see eye to eye with one another. But then, of course, on the policy issues, we need to sort it out within this Bills Committee. But then, at the same time, I hope that the Chair could also listen to my comments and other members' views. I hope that as soon as the administration has already addressed all the points made by members this time, we should immediately move on to clause-by-clause examination. But then it doesn't mean that we cannot discuss the policy itself, because at other bills committees, we could adopt this two-pronged approach. That is, while we scrutinize the bill clause by clause, we could also continue to discuss the policy issues. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your comments. Yes, Secretary, any response? No. All right, on the operation of the Bills Committee, a request has been made. That is how we start the clause-by-clause examination. In fact, before the summer recess, I already said that we would very much like to start the clause-by-clause examination. But then, as chair of this Bills Committee, I also have to ensure that all members' questions and also their letters can be dealt with properly and reasonably. And before the summer break, Mr. Abraham SHEK wrote 2 letters, and then in the course of our summer recess, he also wrote in again. That's why I also have to ensure that these letters have been fully discussed. Other than questions raised by Mr. SHEK, and if other members would like to follow up on them, they would also be able to do so. And therefore, this is my suggestion. All right. The Secretary will be coming to join us later, and we will also be asking questions on the administration's response to Mr. SHEK's questions and also other written questions. So I think we should take the opportunity to focus on these controversial issues. That is number 1, Hong Kong PR companies, should they be exempted, and also charitable organizations, should there be exemption, and also on replacement purchase by non-PR residents. The administration has already responded by coming up with a draft CSA. All right, we can also discuss those, and also we can also discuss the administration's draft CSA. And Mr. SHEK, I've been checking with the Secretariat, and if you have any CSAs or if other members have any CSAs, I hope that they can also pass that on to us so that we'll be able to discuss those as well. All right, please also comment on my suggestion later. Ms. Emily Lau. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we should wait for the Secretary to arrive, but then still we will have to start this before he arrives. All right, Madam Chair, Mr. SHEK, made a scene just now, and welcome for joining us. All right, your anger and your helplessness. All right, for those of us here, many of us have already been experiencing that for years. All right, this split voting system is really very outrageous, Madam Chair. And as a result of that, now that you are on that side of the bench, you can feel that now. But then in the past, you've also joined the others in vetoing many of our suggestions. Now you've had a share of that. You've had a taste of it. It's good. All right. When something is raised by members, all right, number 1, you will have to discuss with others. And number 2, you should also be prepared to listen to views and comments. That's why last week when the Bureau Director came to the Democratic Party's electoral group, all right, initially C.Y. Leung said that he's very firm on that and nothing could be changed. And then a few days ago, the Bureau Director seemed to be more flexible. He said that he would be willing to listen to others' views. And the Financial Secretary has also written something on his blog. And apparently, all of you are only resorting to writing blogs these days. You're not prepared to talk to anyone else. So I think we are trying to legislate and we are trying to plug the loopholes. So, Madam Chair, I think the most important thing is for the administration to be willing to take things up with this council so that there would be better communication. I think on constitutional reforms, it's also about communication. And on this bill and the other bill, we also need to have communication. I don't understand why the administration has adopted this stance. And also for the pro-establishment camp, apparently they have all been converted and become the opposition camp. So apparently the administration has no airlines these days, and a couple of days ago I invited you to my web program, and you said that you were very worried because the pro-establishment camp also called upon the administration to withdraw the bill, and that is on another cooling measure. All right, if your policies and if your bills and also your funding proposals, if you want them to be passed so that there can be smooth governance in Hong Kong, then you would definitely have to cooperate with this council so that there would be more discussion and communication. Or Abraham SHEK used to veto our proposals in the past, and now he's having a hard time. So we all understand how it feels. All right, Madam Chair, you asked him to come up with the CSAs as soon as possible. I fully agree, because at the clause examination we should be able to have discuss all the CSAs, because sometimes the members would only be moving them at the very final or at the 11th hour. I've asked him several times, and in fact a few days later I'll be inviting him onto my phone-in program so that they'll be able to listen to his views. But then he's very concerned because we do have the electoral powers and privileges ordinance, but then he is concerned that he might be suppressed. So why is it that everything is now operated like in a black box? You do not have to worry. This is not a triad society. And then a couple of days ago, I already asked Mr. SHEK to come up with the draft CSAs, and he's not willing to do so. And he said that he's not in a position to do so. So you will have to send out a very clear message, Deputy Secretary. You would not be suppressing members moving amendments. You would actually be talking and discussing with members. I think even before the Secretary arrives, and for those of you here, your civil servants, I'm sure you could answer the question. How come Mr. SHEK is so scared? He's scared out of his wits. Well, so people might be worrying why this council is operated in this way. Yes, Ms. Wong. First of all, we do not have the ability, we do not have that ability to suppress any members who would like to move amendments, and I'm sure Mr. SHEK would not be scared. In fact, we have said time and again that in the process of communication, we have been doing that communication, whether or not it's the policy intention, the message, and also the loopholes and so on. Well, at many meetings and also in many of our papers, we have already expressed our concerns, and we have already set them out very clearly. And if members stand to be convinced, then of course we are prepared to discuss with them. And also on the CSAs, or if we have CSAs, in fact, we have already submitted our draft CSAs on several aspects, and I hope that members will take a chance to look at them. And then if you think that there is anything wrong, then we can always discuss them. And of course, if members would like to move CSAs, then we would be more than happy to take a look, and then we can also respond to the situation. We do hope that there can be better communication. Definitely, there is no question of us trying to suppress them or oppress them. All right, for members or the administration, if you want to move amendments, please do let us know and provide us with the drafts. And the administration has already given us this guarantee that is no members would be subject to any pressure or oppression or suppression whatsoever if they want to move amendments. In fact, we have already asked the administration to submit their CSAs as soon as possible, and they've already done so, Mr. SHEK. And if you want to move any amendments, please do provide us a draft as soon as possible. Mr. Ronnie Tong, Chairman, of course, we support any cooling measures if they are effective in suppressing speculation. But then we have already got this SSD. And if you speculate within 3 years, then you would have to pay more in terms of stamp duty. But then sometimes it could be overdone. All right, you are trying to suppress speculation. That's one thing. But then to restrict Hong Kong permanent residents from buying properties, that might not be necessary, and it's also not fair. And the chief executive has also said about this some time ago. That has to do with the government's high land premium policy, and to arbitrarily dampen the desire of Hong Kong people in buying properties is not the original intention. All right, it's already close to the Mid-Autumn Festival, and we've been going down to the district. We've been very busy these days, and one elderly lady approached me, and she said that she's already retired, and she said that her son was very nice, and he tried to buy a small flat for her. But then he's not able to buy that property under his name because this elderly lady has already retired, and therefore the bank would not accept her if she applies for a mortgage loan. And therefore she said, what am I going to do, Ronnie Tong, because I'm not able to get public rental housing, and then for HOS I'm not eligible, and then my son is willing to make the down payment, but then I'm not able to buy my flat. So what am I going to do? So this elderly lady is not alone. She's not the only one who is having this problem. In fact, she actually asked a question which I do not have the answer. All right, she said that, all right, the administration is trying to suppress speculation, but then my son is buying this flat for his parents, and we are not speculators. Why is the administration trying to clamp down on this? So maybe the administration can tell us today. All right, for HKPL own companies, if they are involved in property transaction, all right, you have already got measures to suppress speculation. So you should not be denying Hong Kong people or permanent residents from buying their flats. You should not be shirking your responsibilities by rolling out these measures. In fact, you should have increased supply of land and flats, because we all know that the real reason for this skyrocketing property prices, we all know the reasons, but then you're trying to share your responsibility by rolling out these cooling measures so that you would not be subject to so much criticism. I think let's be frank and honest about it. So if that is the case, then I really hope that you can go back and think about it. Please think about those cases that I just referred to. These are elderly ladies and gentlemen. All right, if you can come up with a way to help them, then this council will definitely be fully behind you. I don't think that allowing a good son to buy a flat for his mum would deteriorate the property market. If that is the case, then please go back and look into the mirror with your hand on your heart. Is it that you can still be so thick-skinned in telling this lie? I think you're just depriving Hong Kong permanent residents from buying their own properties.
Yes. There are a few points here. The policy intent of the BSD is not to deprive the chance of Hong Kong PR to purchase a property. It's exactly because of the genuine need of Hong Kong PR to buy a property that we need the measure. And I'm not clear about the example cited by Mr. Tong. Well, if the person is Hong Kong PR, he's exempted already. No, sorry, you don't understand. Well, the son has already bought a property, but in order to buy the second one, then he will have to pay BSD. The parents cannot buy a property because they cannot get a mortgage from the bank. They have retired. So they need the son to buy the property for them. And in this way, he has to pay BSD. Well, actually, this is not under the purview of the BSD. It's about the double stamp duty. But we're discussing the two things together, the ad valorem duty. Well, actually, there is a separate bill for that. It's the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2013. Yes, I know that. Buying a property under the name of a company is different from in the name of an individual. But why don't you give exemption? But we're talking about the double ad valorem stamp duty. We separate an individual from a company. So even under the double ad valorem stamp duty, if a person has bought a property in the name of a company, when we calculate whether double ad valorem stamp duty is to be calculated, the property bought in the name of the company is not included. So if under this bill, if we exempt the person and if we exempt the company, then then that means the person don't have to pay any duty. Well, back to the BSD first. A Hong Kong PR can buy a property. If it's done under an individual, then there is exemption. If it's done in the name of a company, well, it's not the case that we ban it. For some reason, if the property is bought under the name of a company, then BSD has to be paid. Well, for the majority of Hong Kong people, if they buy a flat to live in, then most of them will buy in their own name. Of course, we are aware that some people may buy in the name of a company. We give them the choice. It's not a ban. If it is banned, then it's against the basic law. It's not the case that we ban them. But if they choose to buy it in the name of a company, they have to pay BSD. That's all. Mr. Andrew Leung. The administration and the media say that the Alliance for Business Professionals don't want the harsh measures. Well, it's the case that we don't want to see exuberant speculative activity, so we know that there is a need for special measures in an extraordinary time. We accept the DS saying that currently the property market is exuberant, but you should allow normal course of purchase. Say, for example, the example cited by Mr. Tong. Well, the son wants to buy a property for the retired parents so that they have somewhere to live. That is normal. And that has been going on for many, many years. And now you say there is loophole, so you don't allow that. Well, do you have any definition about the exuberance of the property market? So to what level, does the market has to drop to before it is withdrawn? We propose a refund. We say that there should not be any transfer of shares, there should not be any change of directors. 3 years later, then you can get a refund. You can ask accountants, like Mr. Kenneth Leung, and lawyers, Mr. Ronnie Tong, to verify that everything is in order. I know you're not a solicitor, you're a barrister, but you're from the legal sector. So if the property is owned for 3 years without any change of shareholders of directors, then surely it is not a speculation. So we have closed all the loopholes for you. It's an idea come up with by the chairperson. We think it's a good idea. Just now, Mr. James Toh said that, well, if actually it is more dangerous to allow a property being purchased by an individual because there are over 7 million loopholes, but you close all the doors for companies. We don't know what you want to do. Of course, we don't want to encourage speculative activities, but this should not be the right approach. Well, I will propose amendments later. You see that we've been talking to the Bureau Secretary since Thursday. The Secretary said that he would think about it. He may not have an answer today. Doesn't matter, we will give you more time. But on the other hand, a label has been just slapped on to the face of Mr. Abraham SHEK, saying that he's speaking for the interest of his sector. You see that last year, 2012, in the first-hand market, there are 12,000 units. In the second-hand market, 78,999. We're talking about the interest of Hong Kong. starting from this week, well, if the U.S. reduce its purchase of debt instrument, there will be a drop of 25%. And you can imagine how many people from the middle class will be unhappy because they will see that their property turning into a negative equity. You can see from history. Well, if you cannot buy a property, you won't kill yourself. But if your property turns into a negative equity, you might. So, to what level will you withdraw the measure? We've said in the first reading that this is a demand-side measure, a demand-side management measure. But this is an extraordinary measure. It will not be a standing policy. We roll out the policy because we're waiting for an adjustment. So you are actually encouraging us to put in a sunset clause. Well, perhaps you are more intelligent than we are. It's difficult to tell when we no longer need this measure. A negative vetting provides us with the most flexibility. Last time, the Secretary in the Bills Committee said that, of course, the administration would monitor the situation, and he undertook that at least a year after the bill has been endorsed, he would come back to report to the to talk to the LegCo. So there will be regular communication. If we think there is a need for adjustments a year before it's required, we would immediately come back to the LegCo. So this is a better, more swift response than a sunset clause. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. I strongly support the administration to roll out measures to stabilize the property market. Youngsters, people from the middle class can't buy properties. I think the source of the problem is to find more land. But before we have a reliable land policy, by that I mean we'll be able to come up with more land. We see that no matter what options you float, there are a lot of problems and controversy. You see, this is the index in the private residential market. The one in red is those under 100 square meters. The one in purple are units that are bigger. You see, in 2010, when the first time the SSD was launched, there was a drop for 1 month, and then later it was increased. When the BSD was first introduced, it increased, and then for larger flats, it dropped. According to the Rates and Valuation Department, and starting in last year, July, since the SSD was put in place, there is an increase of 50% for smaller flats, for bigger flats, 20%. But if you look at the rental index, yes, the administration has rolled out 3 measures. Rent level is on the increase. You say you want to stabilize prices in the property market, but there are 2 prices. One is the purchase price, the other one is rent. You may roll out measures. People will have to rent if they can't buy, but if rent is getting more and more expensive, then for a certain group of Hong Kong people, the impact may be more significant. Just like what Mr. Leung said, if the U.S. exit the market, there may be a drop of 25%. Some say that there will be a drop of 50% in terms of prices in the property market. What are you going to do? You said you have studied the entire property market, and also the financial market or the entire economy, the impact on these. So what if the U.S. exits from the market? what would you do? This is something a responsible government should do. You have to take a step at a time. So what will you be your next move? DS. Mr. Lam points out that the increase in the prices in the property market is not something that can be controlled or reined in by just the administration. And it's not the intention of the administration to push down the price. If there is changes in the external economy, say for example, exchange strategies, then it will be worse for the property market if there is a hard landing. And that's why we roll out, we have that in mind when we roll out the measures. Between March and July this year, there has been an increase on average of 0.4%. Compared to the previous 2 months, there is an increase of 2.7%. So we would like to dampen the exuberance in the market. There are many external factors affecting the prices in the market. It's not decided by just one single factor. We just want to stabilize the market. We are not trying to suppress and push down prices. That is not what we have in mind. We just want the market to develop in a stable way. And as to whether we have other measures up our sleeves when the situation changes, we will explore that. The DS fails to answer my question. She said that they will monitor the situation and there are many factors. But what I asked was what you would do, because the administration should do studies. If it's scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, what would you do? What have you done? Can you tell us? DS. The administration closely monitors the situation. No, we all closely monitor the situation. What have they done apart from monitoring? Anything to add, DS? What have you done? The relevant policy bureau monitors the property market. That's why we said repeatedly that it's not suitable for us to withdraw the measures. It's a decision made after we have looked at the situation. Of course, we monitor the situation, taking into account the changes. We said we would like to have a flexible mechanism in the bill so that the administration can swiftly respond to the situation.
Madam Chair, I don't think she has answered my question. Maybe the Bureau Director will be in a better position to do so. All right, what have they done? All right, watching the market closely. All right, everybody is doing that. But then what kind of research have you done? All right, let's say if the U.S. is going to withdraw from the market, if there is a drop by 25%, 50%, so what are they going to do? All right, the Bureau Director just entered the room. All right, this is already our 23rd meeting. This is already our 13th meeting, and the Bureau Director is here to answer the questions raised by members. In fact, during the past 13 members, we have already been focusing on several issues. Number one, for companies owned entirely by HKPR residents, so should they be exempted, and also charitable organizations, and also for replacement purchase, for redevelopment cases, there will be exemption. And also, well, given the current external environment, all right, if there is uncertainty, then how are you going to monitor the changes so that adjustments can be made to these cooling measures? All right, with the director here, I'd like to know if you have any opening statement. So we'll first deal with these issues, and then we will open the floor to questions. All right, Madam Chair, I'll say a few words first. I've heard what Mr. Jeffrey Lam just said. I'll be responding to that later. Madam Chair, I'm very pleased to be able to come to the Bills Committee meeting again to explain the administration's stance on issues related to the demand-side management measures this morning, as I have to attend the 16th Hong Kong Guangdong Cooperation Joint Conference meeting. That's why I was not able to attend from the very beginning, from the start of the meeting. My apologies for that. the administration rolled out these management or demand-side management measures that's in response to the imbalance in supply and demand, and also the super low interest rate, and also the overflow of liquidity in the property market in recent years. As a result of these, there have been irrational exuberance in the property market, and as a result, property prices have deviated from the economic or financial undertone. And we would also like to reduce the chance or the risk of the bursting of a bubble in the property market, and hence we would also like to maintain or lower the blow that the overall economy could be subject to if the property bubble bursts. And then with tight supply in the property market, the policy should give priority to Hong Kong permanent residents' property buying needs, and we believe that the fundamental solution to this problem is still to increase supply. And since the rolling of these measures, there were already an increase by some 20% in property prices in the first 9 months of 2012, and that was already an increase by 108% when compared to the ebb in 2008. With the rolling out of these measures in October 2012, immediately we have been able to lower the temperature in the property market, and the rising trend was dampened. But then in early 2013, in the first 2 months, there was an average increase by some 2.7% in property prices. Only after the second round of the cooling measures were introduced in February 2013, that the situation became stable. And in between March and July this year, on average, property prices still rose by 0.4% every month, despite the fact that the measures had been able to curb the overheated property market, and that also changed the community's sentiment that property prices would only go up and not come down. And this is an irrational expectation, but then and that would also help lower the risk of the bursting of the property bubble. But then individual people from the sector still ask the administration to dilute the measures or even withdraw those measures. Here, I'd like to stress once again that the administration is determined in upholding the healthy development and stable development of the property market, and before the property market resumes some normalcy, the administration has no intention of withdrawing the cooling measures. In fact, the community at large also agree with the necessity of these measures, and the majority of the public also do not support that the administration should withdraw or dilute these measures in the current circumstances. In fact, some commentaries have also said that we have been able to deal a blow to the market, and the administration and the current assessment is that if the administration just arbitrarily withdraw these views, that would only deal a blow to the property market, and we would also be sending out the wrong message, to the extent that the community might suspect that we may not be determined in stabilizing the property market, and once again there would be irrational exuberance in the property market, and the efforts that the administration has made in cooling property prices would be wasted, and that would increase the risk of the bursting of the bubble in the market, and the damage that can be done to the macro economy could be even greater, and all sectors will stand to lose. And therefore, any suggestion that we should dilute or reduce the cooling measures would only increase the risk of the bursting of the bubble. As I've pointed out on the 7th of June this year in attending this Bills Committee's meeting, the administration has been listening to members' views and the comments made by different sectors on this policy without affecting the objective of stabilizing the property market, without creating any further loopholes that would be difficult to plug. Without sending out the wrong message to the market, and without rendering the bill ineffective, the administration is willing to fine-tune some of the details. For example, we have already said that we would be willing to refund the property buyers if they're involved in redevelopment projects, so that instead of only getting the refund 4 or 5 years later, they would be able to do so some 4 to 5 years earlier. And there are also some technical amendments with regard to companies solely owned by Hong Kong permanent residents, and if they they also like to get an exemption for the BSD. The administration has repeatedly explained our position to members. As I've said at the meeting held on June the seventh, as there are different ways for companies to alienate their to transfer their shares to non-permanent residents or other people, there would be different ways for them to circumvent this rule, and the IRD would find it difficult to verify, and as a result, it would be difficult to prevent abuse. Well, for companies, they have different ways to transfer their shares. For example, they can also use a nomination and also trust declaration and also powers of attorney. They could also allot new shares. They could also issue new classification of shares, and they can even change the rights under the existing shares. And some of the ways, for example, allotment of new shares and also issue of new classification of shares, the relevant parties do not have the responsibility to notify the IRD about such alienation of shares. And if we were to plug these loopholes by introducing changes to the existing well-established tax system and also company registration system, for example, if we require all acts which might affect the control of the companies to be notified to the IRD and also the company registry, then that would also make some substantial changes to the existing way that companies operate. As these are exceptional measures at an exceptional time, we do not believe that this would be in line with the principle of proportionality, in the sense that these measures would not be proportional to what we are dealing with. Some members also said that there could be refund of tax, and there could also be a requirement for the relevant parties to make a statutory declaration, and the penalties could also be increased. But then as the IRD has no way of finding out whether or not the companies concerned have violated these exemption rules, then the mechanism would be hard to prevent abuses, and even if the penalties were to increase further, it would not be able to achieve the desired effect, and the IRD representatives will be explaining this further. With regard to the situation in Hong Kong, to establish a company would be very easy, and the procedures are very simple. That's why if we were to exempt all companies wholly owned by Hong Kong PR from paying this BSD, then the risks cannot be underestimated. If people try to own companies which might in turn own properties, then the IRD will have to investigate very deep and far before it will be able to find out how many companies are actually owned by Hong Kong permanent residents or otherwise. On the other hand, while there is a short supply in units these days, I think the priority should be given to the housing needs of Hong Kong permanent residents. And if we were to extend this exemption to companies solely owned by Hong Kong permanent residents, or if we were to exempt companies where Hong Kong permanent residents would be accounting for a certain percentage of shareholders or directors, then that would only give rise to more controversy, and there might also be accusation of not offering a level playing field for companies. With regard to the proposal that charitable organizations under Section 88 of the IRO should be given exemption as well, well, the administration has to bear in mind different considerations, because under Section 88 of the IRO, charitable organizations would also have to pay ad valorem tax under the relevant legislation. And if we were to exempt charitable organizations from paying the BSD, then the existing stamp duty regime and the IR and also the tax regime will be affected, because there will be inconsistency. And under the present law, there is no provision to define what's meant by charitable organization or charitable purposes. And under Section 88 of the Inland Revenue Ordinance, we will have to look at past cases. Under Section 88 of the IRO, there might be different nature of what charitable organizations may have different operations, and there are about 7,000 such organizations, and about 3/4 of them have been registered under the company's ordinance. And if we were to exempt them from paying BSD, then that might give rise to new incentives for people to circumvent tax, so that individuals or companies might set up charitable organizations, and then through such charitable organizations, they would be buying properties. And if we were to plug such loopholes, then we will have to comprehensively review our monitoring mechanism for charitable organizations, and the situation would become even more complex. Madam Chair, we understand that there are some suggestions that they are concerned that the administration might not be able to withdraw such demand-side management measures while there is a reversal of fortune in the property market. But then to come up with a sunset clause for these measures is something that the administration would not agree with, because there is no way that we can speculate on the changes in the property market and also the external factors that might affect the property market. And therefore, by introducing such a sunset clause, that would only send out a wrong message, and that would only stimulate the demand for units. But then I can assure members that the administration will continue to watch the market closely, and in due course we will be amending that accordingly in order to respond to the latest situation in the market. We promise that a year after the enactment of the bill, we will be reporting to this Council on the latest position, and before we make such a progress report, we will continue to watch the market closely. And while I was entering the room, I heard Mr. Jeffrey Lam say that how the administration would be monitoring the market. Well, in simple terms, I'd say that given the fact that the market's development, whether it's myself looking at it from the residential property market angle, or the FS or the SFST, we will be watching the market closely. We'll be looking at the indicators very closely. And every week, the Chief Executive would also have meetings with the FS and also the relevant bureau directors discussing these issues.
Every week, there is a chance for us to discuss matters related to land and property market. I want to reassure legislators that we really will closely monitor the situation. We have Tony Tse, Alan Leung, and Lam Tai Fai, and Abraham SHEK, Andrew Leung, and James To for the second round. For the first round, Paul Tse as well, 5 minutes. Mr. Tony Tse, I would like to follow up on purchase of residential properties by charitable organizations for charitable purpose and the exemption of BSD. On the 26th of July, paragraph 5 in the paper, I would like to ask some follow-up questions and seek clarification. Well, the Secretary said that this is an extraordinary time requiring extraordinary measures. We have had a discussion and we have made proposals about the possible exemption on charitable organizations when they purchase residential properties for charitable purpose. As far as I know, there are exemptions when it comes to profits tax. So I'd like to hear more from the administration as to why a refund cannot be allowed, whereas they are exempted profits duty. Well, you talk about far-reaching implications, but this is a short-term measure, and there are cases when someone has to pay the BSD and other cases when one does not. So there are different natures, as you can see. So I don't really understand why you don't allow charitable organizations to be exempted in the case I just cited. And as far as I understand, charitable organizations buying residential properties for charitable purpose amounts to very few cases. This will not increase demand, thereby affecting Hong Kong people's chance of buying a property. I don't really understand. Well, a property is purchased, but it's for charitable purpose. And it's for the good of Hong Kong people. So how does it affect Hong Kong people? Thank you. Secretary, perhaps I would defer to the Deputy Commissioner of the IR to give you more information about the actual operation. Well, Mr. Tse talked about exemption of profits tax. Well, the exemption covers activities related to the charitable object. But under the stamp duties regime, all charitable organizations, including those under Section 88, they have to pay ad valorem stamp duty when they buy a property. So there is no exemption under the stamp duty regime. But if we give them exemption of the BSD, then we are introducing a major change to the entire regime. Where do we draw the line? How do we ensure, as I said, that there are many different types of charitable organizations and 3/4 of them are registered under the company's ordinance. So we will have to review the entire regulatory regime of charitable organization. The Section 88 of the IRO is not there to regulate charitable organizations. Well, but how come as profits tax are exempted? Well, yes, as far as I understand, the BSD is a short-term measure. BSD is under the stamp duty regime. And you may recall last year when we rolled out the BSD in October, we said that we would like to increase the cost of a purchase of a property to dampen the property market. But the only exemption of this comprehensive measure is for Hong Kong PR only. We would like to take care of the genuine housing need. The purpose is not to expand the scope of exemption as wide as possible. Anything to add from the IRD? I'd like to talk about the operation of profits tax. Exemption of profits tax of charitable organizations under Section 88. First, you will have to decide whether the organization is a charitable organization and whether the object of the organization is a charitable object. And there has always been controversy in this regard. It's not clearly defined. And if they carry on business that generates profits, they will have to meet certain conditions before they are exempted. And that include the profits generated will have to be plowed back for charitable purpose. And the activity is done in the course of its express charitable object and is mainly carried out by the beneficiaries of the charity. So there are a number of conditions to be met. And each condition is subject to controversy. Say, for example, about the charitable purpose. We have to act in accordance with the law. When it comes to recognizing a certain organization status under Section 88, there are certain requirements when it comes to documentations. Say, for example, limitation of the distribution of of income and profit when they wound up, the money have to go to other charitable organizations. And this is an administrative requirement. It's not legally binding. And if organizations do not abide by these requirements, we cannot force them to fork out the money or to do what they are supposed to do. What we can only do is to decide whether to revoke its status as a charitable organization. But even with a revocation, do they have to pay tax? Well, they may not have to pay tax in the first place. And the tax is paid by the organization, not the parties involved. And it will be difficult for us if we want to pin it on the relevant individuals, because the individuals might have already disappeared. So we are facing great difficulties. That's all I want to say now. Mr. Alan Leung. Thank you. On behalf of the Civic Party, I would like to state clear that we strongly support the administrations in the rolling out of these measures, because we see that there are Hong Kong people who are suffering because they can't buy a flat. We feel for them. But when it comes to the policy, of course, you will have to keep in mind the interests of the Hong Kong people as a whole. We think exemptions are acceptable. We think that the property prices have been pushed up by mainly overseas buyers, and this is an extraordinary measure in an extraordinary time, and it should target overseas speculators. There are 2 points here. Charitable organization and companies wholly owned by Hong Kong PR. They have been caught. There are innocent parties that have been caught. And of course, if you want to target overseas speculators, but you catch these innocent parties, you will have to introduce measures to take care of that. Have you made any comparisons between other jurisdictions or other countries? Because Hong Kong is not the first place to introduce such measures. So is it the case that in overseas jurisdictions there are no exemptions whatsoever? And is this something that you use to support your argument? And I'd like to say something about charitable organizations. Well, you might have it in a response paper. Still, I remain unconvinced. Well, if we have a general discussion of exemptions on charitable organizations, that say, for example, the secretary even said that there is a need. There may be a need for a very comprehensive review of the regulation of charitable organizations. I think you have made it sound more grave than it is. Well, is it the case that people are using charitable organizations to and cost the exuberance of the property market? Just now, the Deputy Commissioner, in answer to Mr. Tony Tse's question, touched on profits tax, but still, he talked about certain conditions that have to be met. Say, for example, the organization bought a property for RCHEs, for residential center for the elderly, for their staff members. Well, we all accept that such purchases is not the cause of the exuberance of the property market. They are simply innocent parties caught. So, well, I'd like to hear something about charitable organizations from the administration. Secretary. I thank Mr. Leung, and I also thank the Civic Party for their support of the demand-side management measures and these extraordinary measures to cool down the exuberance of the property market. It's not the case that we want to turn the other cheek. We want to ensure the effectiveness of the demand-side management measures will not be undermined. We don't want to send out the wrong message to the market, thereby causing another wave of exuberance of the market. So we do not agree with watering down these measures. And in relation to exemptions, say for example, in relation to redevelopment, we have taken on board views of members, and we propose to introduce exemptions. Whatever it is, we have to consider whether there will be serious loopholes, and if, in order to plug these loopholes, we have to roll in measures that runs counter to our original policy. And exemptions should not send out a wrong message to the market that we have relaxed our determination to bring down the exuberance of the market. We see loopholes in the exemption of charitable organizations. The IRD may supplement. And in relation to overseas jurisdictions, as far as we know, there are no exemptions to companies. And you may ask, how come a company has to pay while an individual doesn't? Well, the policy intent of the BSD is to increase the purchase cost to cool down the market. So originally, this is a comprehensive measure. The only exemption is on Hong Kong PR. And you may say, well, why don't you give Hong Kong PR the choice to buy a property in the name of a company? Well, if we are to plug the loopholes of companies, then we have to introduce a lot of changes.
Mr. Lam Tai Fai. All right, Bureau Director, you have repeatedly said that if the cooling measures were to be diluted, then the message sent out to the market would be that the administration does not have the resolve to clamp down on speculation, and the public's confidence in the administration might be reduced. In fact, that would not be the case. In fact, the public would only doubt if you have the ability to do so. They would not be. They would not think that you're doing something else. All right. The administration is now saying that the administration has no intention of withdrawing the measures. Unless the property market has returned to some normalcy. Does it mean that nobody would be living in subdivided flats, so that all middle class and also young graduates will be able to buy their own flats? So what's meant by normalcy in the property market? What's your view? Well, your view might be very different from members and even from the public. So if there is a gap between your view of normalcy and the public's view of normalcy, then there is no way that you are going to withdraw those measures. So can you answer my question? That is what's meant by normalcy in a property market. And secondly, you said yesterday, and you said that if the cooling measures could not cool, then they are not cooling measures at all. And you would not be concerned about how far the property prices might be dropping. But then the most important thing is there should not be any exuberance in the market. All right, these are just your feeling. What's meant by exuberance? So, well, how high should the price be if you think that there is exuberance in the market? Because there are many people out there who are waiting to buy their properties. And in fact, there are still many people living in subdivided flats. So when you describe that the property market is exuberant, what's meant by that? Because different people might have different views. And for those of us in the business sector, we might also have a different view on what's meant by exuberance. So please do not use those sensational words. And also, before rolling out the cooling measures, you said that priority would be given to permanent residents buying their own properties. But then, since the rolling out of the measures, how many people have managed to buy their own flats? In the future, how many people are expected to be able to buy their own flats? Have you got any projections? In fact, there are already some side effects. There are many consequences, but then it doesn't matter. So long as Hong Kong permanent residents are able to buy their own flats, it's okay. But then, can you be sure that there are a certain number of people who are able to buy their own flats after the rolling of these measures? Can you quantify that? How many people will now be able to buy their own flats after the rolling out of the measures? All right, it's a long question. I'll try to be brief in my response. Well, to respond to those people with housing needs, including those living in subdivided flats and so on, as I said, the fundamental solution is to increase housing supply. But then what's meant by normalcy in the property market? I'll be answering that in a moment. Alright, in October last year and in February this year, the administration rolled out 2 rounds of cooling measures, and at the time of rolling out these measures, we already explained why the market was irrational and there was exuberance in the market, because basically it has deviated from the undertone of our economy. It has gone beyond the reach of the ordinary public. Is no longer affordable to them, because if you look at the prices when compared to the average price in the past 20 years, it has gone up by a very wide margin. And of course, to different people, in terms of the risk and also in terms of what's meant by exuberance, there might be different interpretations. What's meant by normalcy in the property market? Mr. Lam, please do not barge in. Please allow the Bureau Director to answer the question. Well, we roll out those measures. That's because we think that we will have to deal with the irrational expectation. As you might recall, in October last year, if you look at the discussion in a community back then, if you look at the media reports, in fact, there were views that property prices would only go up and they would never come down. And also, if you look at the risk of the bursting of the bubble, I just quoted the remarks in The Economist. That's why we said that these are exceptional measures at an exceptional time. But then we never said that property prices will have to come down by a certain margin. We did not cite any indicators before we rolled out those measures. Of course, we have to look at the overall picture, including the impact on the financial system. Mr. Paul Chair, Madam Chair, of course, I fully understand that during difficult times, we might have to depart from our usual policies and measures. But then, of course, we have to try and avoid that as far as possible, because Hong Kong's reputation as a free port has been hard-earned, and we have to cherish that. But then the administration has never faced up to our questions. That is, under the Basic Law, there might be problems. Let me cite 2 points first. Hong Kong's Basic Law is a very special constitutional document. In other countries, they would not have things spelled out so clearly like we do in a Basic Law. And in fact, after the reunification, we do have different policies. For example, on the right of abode for permanent residents, there might be problems already. We cannot just say that in other places they have similar measures to curb the property market prices. That's why there is no problem for us to do the same thing in Hong Kong, because in international financial centers, they would not have similar measures. For example, in New York, London, and Tokyo, they do not have similar measures. And correct me if I'm wrong. And also, if you look at the structure of the Basic Law, other than Article 26, which targets Hong Kong permanent residents, actually, if you look at all other provisions, starting from Article 24, 35 and 7 and so on, there is no distinction between permanent residents or otherwise. They would be afforded the same level of protection in all respects. And also, if you look at 105, actually it spells out very clearly that whether or not you are individuals or body corporates, the rights that you enjoy would be the same. Well, very rarely would there be a constitutional provision that state the same thing. I think a very critical principle is under the Basic Law is that we should be affording the same level of protection to everybody in Hong Kong. And if you can do so economically, then you can do so in terms of one's freedoms, and you can always change the inherent protection afforded to the individual, so long as you can justify that. And the civic party has been very concerned about people's rights and interests, and I think they do not dare to face up to this after the saga involving the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge Court case. All right, for many years, many people have set up their own limited companies in owning properties and their businesses, and so far, in terms of the choice in Hong Kong as far as a free port, we have been insisting on that. Despite there has been threats and in the U.S. They would not change their stance, because freedom is what they have to hang on to and uphold. And in Hong Kong, the most important thing for us is for us to choose whatever way that we want to run our own businesses. And Hong Kong people are very used to doing this by setting up their own companies. This is our own window, and I think you are depriving Hong Kong people of this, and you will have to have strong justifications. And both the Bureau Director and your colleagues have been saying that, if you were to grant this exemption, it will be difficult to plug the loopholes. I think James Toh has been right. You talk about proportionality. So long as you force them to make a declaration, so long as there is criminal liability if they make a false declaration, then, if they hide the interests of non-permanent residents in these companies, then they will have to show the criminal liability. So it's like CSSA and also student welfare. You can only rely on their making this statutory declaration. How can you go behind everybody's declaration to find out if they have made a false declaration? You do not have that ability. You can only rely on this system. Why are you not prepared to do so in this case? And also in terms of property ownership, I think there are bigger problems, because you're talking about equity, you're talking about property, and there are many ways that you can go after them. When compared to CSSA recipients and also student welfare recipients, there is very little you can do about it. But then in this respect, there are many ways that you can go after them. So with my limited time, I can only say this much. And I hope that we can get the advice from the DFJ. How come for these cooling measures that would not be against the important principles enshrined in the Basic Law? I understand that we also have a response from the DFJ already. I hope that that could be in black and white, because in the past we only talk about the face of it. We haven't really touched on the crux of it. On the plug holes that might be created as a result of setting up companies and so on, I'll leave it to the IRD, which will explain further. Well, under the Basic Law, in fact, where there is any bill, that will have to be scrutinized by the DFJ to see if it might be in breach of the Basic Law, and therefore the DFJ has already looked at that very carefully. So I'll ask the DFJ to talk about it. On a free port, for individual countries and cities, how would they constitute this free port and so on? There might be different factors, for example, tax regime, rule of law, and so on. But then with the measures in place in Hong Kong, for example, we gave an example, and the Heritage Foundation in 2013, in terms of economic freedom, Hong Kong still ranked number 1, and number 2 was Singapore, and number 3 is Australia. And Singapore and Australia, incidentally, also have measures in place to restrict non-nationals buying properties. And of course, we are not just copying from them. We also have to design our own measures. Yes, Deputy Secretary. Yes, on the point about the SSD and also the BSD, whether or not they are in line with the Basic Law. Well, other than responding to some deputations' queries, we have already given some written responses. In fact, in response to the request by the Bills Committee in April, we also issued a paper number /1 893 /01. In that letter, we also set out in detail what Mr. Chair just said with regard to the SSD and BSD, whether or not they are consistent with the Basic Law Article 25 and also 108. We have given a very detailed reply to that. So please refer to that letter. IRD, can you also tell us more about the loopholes that is for companies wholly owned by Hong Kong permanent residents, how that might create loopholes? Well, according to my understanding, if there are people who have established this trust declaration, and then they might alienate the beneficial interests of the companies to some other people. They do not have to show it to other people, only they themselves will know about it, and the IRD does not have any way to find out, as they are able to control the shares of a company in controlling such properties, and in some cases, according to our understanding, they might have signed some blank declaration on the alienation of shares. So they might have signed some blank alienation of shares, and they might be controlling the seals and bank accounts. They might even sending the people to the company to become directors of the company. So in other words, they might have taken such acts, and after then they would be able to control the entire company and also its properties and assets. And there is no way that we will be able to find out if these people or individuals do not disclose them to us. What we can see is that sometimes when people transfer the beneficial interests of the company to other people, there is no effective mechanism in place for us to find out, and therefore the risks would be very high. Just one word. Time's up, Mr. Chair. All right. It's also hard for you to find out if people have made a false declaration. It's like the chief executive and also senior officials. You've also set up companies to circumvent the law, but then it doesn't mean that for normal people they would be doing this too. All right. Who else who has not spoken would like to ask questions? This is the first round. Mr. Chen Kam Lam. Anyone else? Sorry. Who would like to speak in the first round? Because I'd like to arrange the time properly. All right, then I'll draw a line there. And then in the second round, we have Mr. Abraham SHEK, Andrew Leung, James To, Kenneth Leung, and also Lam Tai Fai. I suggest that everybody will have 4 minutes. I hope that we'll be trying our best to ask questions. Yes, Chen Kam Lam. Thank you, Chairman. The DAB supports the so-called cooling measures introduced by the administration to dampen the exuberance in the property market. And of course, in October last year, after rolling out the cooling measures, we can see that they have been effective. But then what we'd like to know is, well, recently the administration has been saying that, some members suggested that for charitable organizations and Hong Kong PR-owned companies, there should be measures to dilute these cooling measures. I don't think we should view these as diluting measures or relaxation. Well, Hong Kong permanent residents buying properties in the name of companies, that has been a well-established habit for many people.
If the measure is to reduce the number of speculative activities in foreign funds coming to Hong Kong, then you need to allow Hong Kong people to buy purchases without being affected by this measure. So Hong Kong PR-owned companies take care of is a form of property purchase. And as to whether there will be tax evasions, yes, we agree that there may be such cases. But in Hong Kong, we have a simple tax regime. So there are many possibilities where one can abuse the system. If you are aware of any loopholes, please say so, and we can discuss with the administration as to how to plug the loopholes, because we would like to resolve the problem. And of course, if the measures are undermined by the loopholes, and that it brings another wave of exuberance in the property market, well, there is always a possibility. And if Hong Kong people enter the market at such times, they have to take the risk. There is still an obvious property bubble, an obvious sign of a property bubble. When there are changes, say for example, changes in the US or UK, then the market may change in a different direction. We see that recently the property market has been quite slack or quiet. Well, we advise Hong Kong people not to take risks unless they have to. The DAB supports the measures, and we would like Mr. Abraham SHEK to give us the proposed amendments as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will be difficult for us to know the extent of the proposed amendment and how watertight it is, and whether there will be possible loopholes. Mr. Abraham SHEK's purpose of introducing the amendment is to allow Hong Kong PR-owned companies to buy properties, not to allow people to evade tax. So we ask Mr. Abraham SHEK to give us the proposed amendments in order to allay unnecessary speculations. We've spent a very long time and many meetings working on this bill. This is not a good message to the market. Would you need an answer? I asked the Secretary to consider this, to just see it as something simple and consider the exemption. So what's your view, Secretary? We've said that we do not want to undermine the effectiveness of the measure. In relation to specific exemptions, we've been listening carefully the views, and if it doesn't involve major changes, we would consider it. When it comes to exemption to companies, we are very concerned about possible abuse under the tax regime. And the DOJ has explained on the legal issues. We've never considered exempting companies, because if we do, then there will be different treatments between Hong Kong PR-owned companies and non-Hong Kong PR-owned companies. If there are different treatments, then there will be a playing field that is not level, and there will be other problems. Members, do you agree that I will exercise discretion to extend this meeting by 15 minutes? Otherwise, we will not be able to allow 4 minutes in the second round. Mr. SHEK. Secretary, you came twice out of 13 meetings. I thank you very much. Just now the Secretary mentioned about a level playing field. Yes, I agree. Hong Kong is successful because people doing business here know what the situation is. Secretary, you said you can't exempt companies. Then how can you exempt developers and allow them to make an application for a refund of the 15%? You contradict yourself. I want to give my views to the administration so that the administration will move CSAs. I don't want this the administration to see me as the opposition. I just want to convince the administration. The Business Professions Alliance support the measures. We support the 2010 the measures launched in 2010. The chief executive said a number of times that the measures are not perfect. But mine is only a humble request asking you to fine-tune it, to give the rights enshrined in the Basic Law back to Hong Kong PR so that they can buy a property in the name of a company. And this is not something new. You make allowance in urban renewal. I'll write a letter to you. I will propose amendments. You talk about your concern, you talk about the loopholes. If you look at the letter letter dated the 12th of September, I don't know whether you've read it. I've spent a lot of time in it. Just answer my questions in the first paragraph. Well, I don't want to talk about the letters. My amendment is simple. If a Hong Kong PR use a Hong Kong company to make a purchase, he will pay the BSD the 15% upfront, and after 3 years, they can make an application for a refund. They will make declarations to whoever, solicitors, whoever, that they are not holding a trust or the property for a non-Hong Kong PR. And within 3 years, there won't be any change of shareholders, no transactions involved. I don't know where the loophole lies. Well, Mr. Kenneth Leung says that anything is possible, but a professional will have to have a professional ethics. The instrument will have to be stamped. And if someone makes a false declaration, he will be subject to criminal sanction. And they will have to pay 15 times the original stamp duty. I have taken on board the views of the administration and the public. Well, then you will give the proposed amendments to us as soon as possible. Mr. Andrew Leung. Last week, I said to the Secretary that we don't want you to withdraw the measures. We support using these extraordinary measures in the extraordinary time. So don't talk about our request for your withdrawal. We just want things to be normal. And you have to tell us what level you have in mind before you take the next move or make changes. If you accept our amendment, then you can say that you just want things to mean normal. It's not because the administration is weak. If things changes for the worse, you will not hesitate to launch more measures. The DS has said this is a short-term measure. Therefore, there is no need for a sunset clause. The Secretary said that the most important thing is demand and supply. But you will not be able to resolve the problems related to demand and supply. Unless you can actually do something to find land. Well, in the long-term strategy committee, you talk about 20,000 and plus another 20,000 in the future. That is 20,000 public and 20,000 private housing. You already have the letter of Mr. Shek. We ask the IRD to look into it. Identify the loopholes. We will work on plugging the loopholes. If the loopholes cannot be plugged, then I surrender. But you now refuse to look into it. And you are on the offensive without reading Mr. Shek's proposed amendments. We have to sit down and put our heads together to get things done. Don't label us as opposing for the sake of opposing. That we are fighting for the real estate sector. No, it's not the case. We don't want to see 25% of the people having their properties turned into negative equity. Well, we're talking about first-hand property, 12,000. Second-hand property, 80,000. A middle class is suffering too. We're actually trying to save you. Just tell us where the loopholes are. Don't just stigmatize Mr. Shek. Well, I don't think he will be happy when he's labeled in a negative way. Secretary, I've never labeled him in any way. I'm just laying the facts out. We've all faced the same problem. I'm glad to hear you all say that there is a need for these demand-side management measures. But when it comes to specific issues, we have to identify the loopholes. Mr. Shek's letter dated the 12th of September. Well, we will look into it. Can the Secretary explain that developers are exempted in redevelopment, but companies are not exempted? What are the differences? In terms of redevelopment, when I came here in June, I said that the demand-side management measures is not to affect supply from redevelopment. So a refund of BSD is in line with the policy. But of course, there should be sufficient evidence showing that the redevelopment is being implemented, and the developer owns the property 100%.
James Toh, I'd like to respond to the written statement by the Bureau Director just now. Well, these are no new points, but then given the fact that you share with us your views here, I'd like to respond to that too. Well, the first response is on page 4 of your opening statement. You said that there are many ways for the companies to transfer their shares, for example, not by nomination and also trust declaration and so on. Well, for trust declaration, all right, you're talking about millions of Hong Kong permanent residents, and well, that could be used very easily. And therefore, what you're talking about is totally disproportionate to what we are dealing with. All right, if you have to deal with that, then all you need to do, well, you talk about these possibilities, but then when compared to the several million people that we have, all right, you said that it will be difficult for you to identify such trust declarations. You will not be able to find out if there had been such declarations. But then I can always, well, buy a flat, and if it's so easy, all right, you call them investors or speculators as you like. All right, all they need to do is to control somebody. So all I need to do is to ask somebody to do that for me. And then if you're talking about limited companies, then the risk will be higher if you have to control the entire company. All right, I'd like to say this to your technical departments or technocrats. All right, they can issue new classification of shares or a lot shares and so on. Well, for the ordinary member of the public, they'll be scared by what you say. But then if you want to have non-permanent residents controlling these companies, well, all they're trying to do is to do it safely. But then if you have these statutory declaration, whether it has to be done before or after, but then if you can void all such declarations under the law, then the risk that they will have to take up will be extremely high. All right, if you say that they are not afraid of these risks, if they can control several permanent resident shareholders, then why don't they just control one permanent resident, and then they can ask the permanent resident to buy or sell a flat on their behalf? So please do not think that, well, these are very difficult things, and they can always manipulate it. But then if you can render these void, then they will not be able to get any benefit at all. And the risk would be a lot higher than controlling one single permanent resident of Hong Kong who will do this transaction on their behalf. And also on charitable organizations, those who have been granted such status under the tax law. All right, you're saying that, well, in fact, on many occasions, different officials have said that developers and also charitable organizations might have a lot of links with major developers. But then, is it that these developers or developer-related charitable organizations would be doing the speculation because there's somebody controlling these organizations, and as a result, they would be selling these charitable organizations to those speculators as if they were shell companies? But then, well, even if they are worth tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars, well, the shell is not clean. So would they be doing that? Would they be selling such companies to them? All right, if these are newly established, all right, if there are 7,000 such charitable organizations, and I can always set up a charitable organization which will involve in speculation, will you be granted the status under the IRO? Well, it's difficult because you will have to look at the Articles of Association. I've helped some churches and religious bodies to set up such companies. All right, the IRD has been very meticulous in checking their status. So is it easy for you to get such status? Well, is it that easy for you to just sell that after you have established such a charitable organization? And if the IRD is so incompetent, then why do you have to have the IRD in the first place? All right, I think he has overrun on his 4 minutes. All right, I'll ask the IRD to respond to this point, because Mr. James Toh was saying that, all right, for individuals, the risk is acceptable. How come if it's a company, it's not acceptable? IRD? Well, according to our understanding, if you're talking about two individuals signing such a trust declaration, and if they do not register that, if they do not stamp it, then there is no way that they can register it with the Lands Registry. Then the so-called buyer behind the scene, he will not be given any protection at all, because without his knowing, the other party could sell the property without informing him, and it's very different from the situation in relation to a company. All right, so for individuals trying to hide the identity of the individuals by engaging in such transactions, then the risk would be lower. I hope that he can respond in writing, because this is most ridiculous. This is so outrageous. You're talking about a deputy director. Yes? Yes, Deputy Commissioner. Well, for charitable organizations, they have different ways of going about it. They can always have a blanket document without any date on the alienation of shares and so on. All right, why don't he? I think he should come up with a very detailed document. All right, you're the IRD. You should be looking at it from a professional angle. You should not be looking at things from a political angle. I will be prepared to argue with you till the very end. Yes, Mr. Tam. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the experience that we have gained in our day-to-day processing of these documents. With regard to Section 88 organizations, well, let me supplement on this. Well, on the charitable objective or purposes, all right, it could include many things. It might not be what you're most familiar with, providing rescue or relief to victims or those in need and so on. There is a category beneficial to the community with charitable objectives, and the scope could be very broad. And to obtain the status under Section 88, well, there are many different categories. And the scale of operation, the organization structure could also be varied. But then, can he provide something in writing? Well, you're most concerned about those who might be abusing the situation. So, can you set that out in a paper? Yes. On exemption, Mr. Kenneth Leung, on exemption granted to charitable organizations, they've cited some examples. I'd like to ask, well, for a charitable organization under the IRO, they can engage in some incidental trading, right? All right, they can buy some souvenirs, and that would not affect the status of that charitable organization under Section 88, right? But then when the trading activities exceed certain threshold, does it mean that the entire charitable organization's exemption would be revoked? So can the IRD explain this? Yes, Deputy Commissioner, it depends. If it's involved in certain activities which might have exceeded the threshold, then if they are no longer eligible for that exemption under Section 88, we would only be taking out that part that has exceeded the threshold. We would not just be revoking the status of that organization just because certain acts have exceeded the threshold. So they can also be involved in different batches of trading, so including the part that has enabled them to be granted that status. But then what if they are involved in business transactions? Then they can also be charged profit tax. Then would that still be consistent with the meaning or the intention of Section 88? Can you confirm that? All right, under Section 88, it is already set out that basically they would be granted this exemption, but then there are also certain situations whereby these organizations might be involved in business transactions, and they might not be granted exemptions with regard to those activities that are not under Section 88. Mr. Lam Tai Fai, if a company is involved in redevelopment and it can be refunded the BSD, but then if the charitable organization is involved in charitable operations, and then for permanent residents buying a company which might have bought a flat and yet they would not be refunded the BSD, then for the permanent residents and also the charitable organizations, do you think that is fair to them? No, they would not feel that is fair. They would only think that it's a laughing stock, it's a joke, it's outrageous. All right, what you said is totally meaningless. So I'd just like to ask the question that I asked earlier. I think the current situation is that the administration is not willing to make any concession, and apparently you're suggesting that if you dilute the cooling measures, then there would be continued exuberance in the property market. All right, what's meant by a normal property market? Because that's what all the 8 million people are going after. So this is a utopia. It doesn't exist. But then what's your target? So what's meant by a normal property market? What is the indicator? So that the public will know that by the time when the market has become normal again, then they will be able to buy a flat. So what's meant by a normal property market? What do you mean? So can you be very specific about this? And just now, my question was, well, the cooling measures are there to help permanent residents in buying properties. So what's your target? How many people can be helped? How many more people will be able to buy properties? You must definitely have a target. So can you share that with us, Bureau Director? Madam Chair, I'll try my best to answer the question. Number one, we have not come up with any numerical figure or target. That is how many permanent residents will have to be able to buy their flats before we think we have reached the target. I think, as we said, there is a growing risk that there is a bubble in the property market. That's why for the individuals, they will have to judge for themselves whether or not they can buy their property. So we are not there to tell them whether they should buy a flat. And also, Mr. Lam Tai Fai has asked how we can define normalcy. It's not as simple as giving you a few figures. In fact, in rolling out these cooling measures, and also the demand side management measures, we said that we are concerned about the exuberance in the market. We are concerned that there might be a bubble developing, and we're concerned that in a super low interest rate climate, and given the fact that there is an inflow of external funds and liquidity, and also this irrational expectation that the property prices would only go up and not come down. So these are not normal. That's why if you look at the basket of measures, and we will be looking at a basket of factors in the future in deciding whether or not we have already achieved the target. And it's not for the administration to do it alone. I'm sure the entire community and this council will be watching. So, well, at least for the time being, the abnormal situation, well, as some members who are in support of the administration's rolling out of these measures and also these demand side management measures, I think the community agrees that at this time we do need these measures in place. And also some refer to the redevelopment projects. Whether or not you are the developer or a company, you will have to buy these flats for redevelopment. So it's a very specific and focused approach. You have a very specific target. You will also have to come up with sufficient evidence to show that you are not buying these flats for speculation. You're trying to carry out a redevelopment project. And also for companies to be granted exemption, there might be loopholes. Well, and of course, our concern is that if any company is involved in property transaction, that might also constitute a way that they are trying to circumvent the rule. But then I find it regrettable the administration or the bureau director has not explained what's meant by a normal property market. You may wish to write in your blog as to what that means. And also for redevelopment company, it's easy for you to identify them. But then you're concerned that for Hong Kong PR companies, it will be difficult for you to identify them. All right, for larger companies, of course, they are larger consortium, and that's why they would find it difficulty to evade the law or the loopholes. I think it's a matter of intention. Where there is a will, there is a way. So you think you're able to plug the loopholes there. But then for smaller companies, you think that it's difficult to identify them. That's why you're not able to plug the loopholes. But then we can always discuss how we can plug the loopholes. It's not that, well, it's difficult. That's why you're not going to do it.
Members have asked all questions. Well, I've talked about the arrangement next time. We would like to start clause by clause next time, and we will discuss the CSA of the administration. Mr. Shek, perhaps, and you can send us your proposed amendments next week. Yes, I will next week. I'm just a legislator. I don't have a team of people helping me. I asked them to read my letter. I've written them many letters. Well, I have answered all the questions. I have given examples. Maybe they don't read my letters. They don't give us answers, and they just say that there are a lot of questions and loopholes. They use double standards, and they talk about level playing field. I try to see it from the perspective of the administration. I don't think my proposed amendments will offend the community. It doesn't really matter for developers. We're only talking about 35,000 flats, so an increase or a drop will not affect them in a significant way. Yes. Well, I would like to state my request. It says here, that companies may use a number of ways to circumvent. If you avoid the whole thing, it's just like for a tenancy agreement, if it's not stamped, then it cannot be used in court because it cannot be used to prove title. So you have to tell us how it affects the situation. So you talk about a blank transfer. The Hong Kong PR can also transfer the shares. But you say that well, that is not the case. Then cite us at the relevant legislations. That is a declaration of trust. It's a blank form, and you said it will be better. Please compare apples with apples. Your professional department. If you don't want to do it, tell us. But don't compare something different. That will be, otherwise it will be dishonest. Mr. Shek, I just want to ask the administration. Well, they accept asking Hong Kong PR to make a declaration, but how come they don't accept it when Hong Kong PR make a declaration under the name of a company? What's the logic? How is it fair? You want to answer now, Secretary? No. Well, Mr. Shek and Mr. To made some points, and we will try to answer. And we answer all of Mr. Shek's questions. And we've just received your letter dated the 12th, and we will answer it as well. Yes, I want you to read it, to try to understand it. Yes, we will. No, not you in plural. You yourself, the Secretary. If there are no other business, the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.